Over the decades, eyewitnesses, military personnel, and even scientists have encountered bizarre phenomena in our skies that defy easy explanation. From early encounters that helped kick off the UFO craze to modern-day mysteries with lasting unanswered questions, each story challenges our understanding of what might be soaring above us. First up on our list is the Kecksburg incident that occurred in 1965 in rural Pennsylvania. On one crisp autumn day, residents witnessed a fiery object streaking across the sky before crashing into the dense woods near the town of Kecksburg. Eyewitnesses described the object as acorn-shaped and made of a strange metallic material. What's even more intriguing is how quickly authorities swooped in, cordoning off the area and removing any evidence. Despite explanations ranging from a meteor to a secret military satellite, the abrupt removal of the supposed craft and conflicting witness testimonies have only deepened this mystery. The Kecksburg incident remains a highly debated event, with many convinced that it was no ordinary piece of space debris, but rather evidence of something far more extraordinary. Heading to the American Southwest, our next point centers on an encounter in Socorro, New Mexico in 1973, a case that remains one of the most credible UFO sightings ever recorded. Local police officer Lonnie Zamora reported a close encounter with a mysterious egg-shaped craft that landed briefly near his patrol route. Zamora's account is particularly compelling because he described detailed observations of the craft's structure and behavior, noting that it emitted a powerful, almost magnetic glow and left scorch marks on the ground. His report was taken very seriously by both military investigators and UFO researchers, who found that the physical evidence at the scene corroborated his story. This incident continues to be cited as one of the best documented examples of an unexplained aerial phenomenon, challenging conventional wisdom and inviting ongoing debate. In the vast expanses of Texas near Duncan, a routine drive turned into a nightmare on a warm day in 1980 for three individuals: Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Colby Landrum. They encountered a diamond-shaped craft emitting intense heat and a strange pulsating glow. As they approached, the object released a burst of energy that not only scorched the nearby ground, but also exposed them to what they described as high levels of radiation. The physical injuries and lingering health issues reported by the witnesses lent a terrifying credibility to the event. Despite extensive investigations, authorities have been unable to conclusively explain what occurred that day, leaving the Cash-Landrum incident as one of the most unsettling and medically documented UFO encounters. Next, we travel to the skies over Alabama in 1948, where commercial pilots Wiley Childs and his co-pilot Whitted experienced an encounter that would soon spark widespread curiosity. While cruising at altitude, they observed a bright, saucer-like object following their aircraft, executing maneuvers that no conventional plane could match. The object darted away at impossible speeds, leaving behind a trail of questions rather than answers. Although the incident was initially brushed off as an optical illusion by some, the pilot's reputations and detailed accounts have ensured that this encounter remains a significant piece of aviation and UFO lore. Its early date and credible witnesses continue to invite debate about what the pilots really saw that day. Venturing into the rugged wilderness of Manitoba here in Canada, we encounter the infamous Falcon Lake incident of 1967. While exploring near Falcon Lake, Stephen Michalak came face to face with a glowing, cigar-shaped object that descended from the sky. As he drew near, the craft seemed to radiate an intense heat, and he later suffered unusual burns on his chest and hands, injuries that defied typical explanations. His physical evidence, including peculiar markings and radiation-like effects, has been thoroughly documented by local authorities and independent researchers. The Falcon Lake incident stands as one of the most chilling examples of direct human contact with an unknown aerial phenomenon, raising enduring questions about the nature of that encounter. In 1965, the quiet town of Exeter, New Hampshire found itself at the center of an extraordinary UFO event that involved a diverse group of witnesses. This included local police officers and everyday residents. According to multiple reports, a bright, disc-shaped object appeared in the sky and executed a series of maneuvers that defied conventional aeronautics. What set this case apart was the willingness of local law enforcement to document and investigate the sighting, lending an unusual degree of official credibility. Despite exhaustive searches and numerous interviews, no trace of the object was ever found, and its sudden disappearance only deepened the mystery. Our next case takes us back to the late 19th century in Aurora, Texas. According to local lore and sporadic newspaper reports from 1897, a mysterious object streaked across the sky and crashed in broad daylight. Witnesses claimed the impact left a smoking crater and remnants of an unusual metallic craft. While many dismiss this tale as folklore or a misinterpretation of natural events, its persistence in regional history makes it one of America's oldest UFO crash stories. Researchers note that the detailed accounts describing a loud explosion, strange noises, and even hints of an extraterrestrial design set the stage for later UFO narratives. Despite skepticism and a lack of physical evidence surviving to the present day, the Aurora incident remains an enduring mystery that continues to spark debate among UFO enthusiasts and historians. Heading to the Middle East, our next case unfolds in Tehran, Iran in 1976. During a tense period marked by political and military uncertainties, Iranian Air Force jets were scrambled to intercept an unidentified luminous object. Pilots reported that as they approached, their instruments malfunctioned and the craft seemed to emit a dazzling light that temporarily disrupted radar and communication systems. The incident was thoroughly documented by military personnel, and the pilots' detailed testimonies described a craft that moved with agility far beyond known aircraft capabilities. Although official explanations ranged from sensor glitches to atmospheric anomalies, many experts find these responses unsatisfactory. The Tehran UFO incident remains one of the most credible and confusing cases from the region, fueling ongoing investigations into whether advanced technology or something beyond our understanding was at work that day. Our next case takes us to the remote landscapes of Montana, where in 1967, an incident at Malmstrom Air Force Base left a lasting imprint on UFO lore. During this episode, military personnel observed unexplained lights near missile silos, and reports emerged that these mysterious phenomena coincided with temporary malfunctions of nuclear missile systems. The eerie connection between the UFO sightings and the sensitive equipment on board the base has led many to speculate about the possibility of advanced non-terrestrial technology interfering with human military assets. Although official statements have at times suggested sensor errors or natural phenomena, the precise timing and detailed eyewitness accounts from trained personnel make the Malmstrom incident one of the most serious and disturbing cases in UFO history. For many, the idea that such encounters could potentially impact national security only works to deepen the mystery. In 1987, the quiet surroundings of Akita Prefecture in Japan were shadowed by an encounter that left locals both terrified and intrigued. Multiple witnesses, including local police officers and residents, reported seeing a bright metallic craft that hovered silently before accelerating out of sight. The incident was particularly striking due to the detailed descriptions provided by those on the scene. Accounts noted precise, almost military-like maneuvers that defied conventional aeronautical behavior. Japanese authorities conducted investigations, yet the official records remain inconclusive, and many aspects of the event continue to puzzle experts. The Akita UFO incident not only highlights the global nature of these unexplained phenomena, but also reinforces the idea that such encounters can occur anywhere. Quiet rural regions are not immune to witnessing the extraordinary.
Earlier this year, documents were declassified by United States Homeland Security outlining a secret project designated to identifying, acquiring, studying, and reverse engineering AAVs, aka Advanced Aerospace Vehicles. According to the Pentagon, the project never actually went ahead due to the fact that the government was unable to collect any kind of otherworldly spacecrafts. Sure. The document showed that the budget for the program was was to be 12 to 15 million in the first year, 25 million in the second, and upwards of 50 million US dollars in the third. And the purpose of the project was to ensure national security by accessing and assessing the advanced technology and determining its threat capabilities. Furthermore, the document stated that another drive for the program was the United States' fear that either China or Russia had possibly already been able to reverse engineer these kind of technologies. Despite all of the information released to the public meticulously outlining the project, Homeland Security stands firm on their claim that the program never actually went ahead because it was never actually approved. Personally, I'm not buying it. It sounds more like a foreign enemy was getting too close to uncovering the mission, and so the government released a bogus declassified statement saying that while there was a project, it never actually went ahead, in order to throw them off the scent. If you agree, consider giving this video a thumbs up. Why not, you guys?
Project Sign. Project Sign was an early US military investigation into unidentified flying objects launched in 1948 after a surge in reported sightings. Everything really kicked off with the Kenneth Arnold sighting, followed by the Roswell incident, and then people were spotting UFOs all over the country. So it was time to investigate these reports and assess whether there was a real threat to national security, especially being that it was the Cold War, of course. The team included experts in astronomy, physics, and psychology, all tasked with analyzing UFO reports and data. Sign was a top secret for most of its operation, but in 1949 some of their findings went public and it was pretty intriguing. Basically, they concluded that a small percentage of UFO sightings couldn't be easily explained away by natural phenomena or known aircraft. So this led some members to hypothesize that UFOs might be of extraterrestrial origin. But right around this time, the project was shut down by General Hoyt Vandenberg, Chief of Staff of the Air Force. It was then replaced by Project Grudge, with a slightly different goal, but more on that in a bit. First, let's kick it over to Hannah.
A joint effort between the National Security Agency of the United States, aka the NSA, and the British intelligence agencies dedicated to training super soldiers in charge of UFO retrieval and security lockdown operations. I have to say, my interest is piqued. Project Mannequin, as it's called, was revealed to the public back in the 2000s by several whistleblowers who claim to have been a part of the project at one point or another. Now, while super soldiers in charge of subduing alien threats does sound pretty cool, unfortunately the recruitment process sounds pretty dark. Apparently agents don't just join the team of their own accord, instead hand over their offspring to the government at a young age for some kind of crazy undisclosed amount of money. According to whistleblower reports, the base for Project Mannequin is located in a top secret facility 60 meters underground in Berkshire in southern England, and this is where the soldiers are trained to become some of the most skilled individuals in the world. Now, because I already know you're going to ask, the most famous whistleblower of Project Mannequin was Max Spears, who, after leaking information regarding the project to the public, died under incredibly strange and inexplicable circumstances. Inexplicable as in one moment he sat down on his couch and the very next moment he was dead, and to this day no one knows how it happened, but he believed prior to his death that he was a sleeper agent that had been brainwashed by the government and was involuntarily part of this project. So who knows?
In 1949, Project Sign was replaced with Project Grudge. But now things were different. Their goal wasn't just to assess UFO reports and figure out if they were legitimate. Instead, the purpose was to downplay the presence of UFOs. At the time, the US government was worried that foreign governments could exploit UFO reports, basically causing panic in the public. So Grudge shifted its focus from scientific investigation to straight up debunking UFO reports and reassuring the public that there was nothing extraordinary about the sightings, even when there actually was. J. Allen Hynek, a famous American astronomer, professor, and UFOologist, took issue with Grudge, claiming that it was, quote, less science and more of a public relations campaign, which it was, at least on the surface. Just because they were telling the public UFO sightings were nothing more than balloons, meteors, or optical illusions doesn't mean they were doing research behind the scenes that they felt it best to cover up.
Project Moondust is officially described as a United States project dedicated to recovering the remains of Soviet satellites that re-entered the atmosphere and crashed down to Earth in not only the US but also South Africa, Bolivia, and even the Himalayan mountains. Unofficially, it is possible that the project is actually dedicated to something far more interesting. You know where I'm going with this. The collection and analysis of crashed UFOs. It is believed that while the US claimed to have been recovering satellites, they were actually collecting UFOs, which were then sent out to various military bases throughout the states. The entire thing was revealed by a man named Clifford Stone, who claimed to have been part of the project. Just before his death, he was quoted saying that the entire time the project was going on, they were telling the American public that it had nothing to do with aliens, when in reality, high clearance personnel who were not army officials would always be added to the mission last minute, and they would be the ones to claim ownership of whatever objects were recovered during the mission. These objects were then sent out for testing, analysis, and reverse engineering.
Project Magnet was Canada's government investigation into UFOs. It was launched in December of 1950 by Wilbert B. Smith, a senior radio engineer with the Canadian Department of Transport. Smith had a personal interest in UFOs and believed that they could be scientifically studied. So the main goal of the project was to attempt to figure out what these UFOs were, and if it was possible, they could be using Earth's magnetic field as a source of propulsion. The project involved setting up monitoring stations across Canada equipped with specialized equipment to detect and analyze magnetic and radio frequency disturbances. Smith hoped that by capturing data from these disturbances, they could find patterns and similarities with UFO sightings. Now, Wilbert Brockhouse Smith was an interesting guy. He did believe that UFOs were of extraterrestrial origin and had psychic abilities. He also believed that aliens were communicating to him through the use of telepathy.
Unbeknownst to some, the United States is not the only one with an Area 51 style top secret UFO alien base. That's right, Russia has their very own version of the not so secret alien bunker located in rural Siberia and referred to as Kapustin Yar. It makes sense. I mean, Russia was the first country to send a living being up to space back in 1957, so it's only natural that they would have some kind of corner on the market of UFO and alien artifacts. By the way, for those of you who don't know, the first living being in space was a dog named Laika, who unfortunately did not make it back down to Earth, but that's a sad, sad story for another day. While some of the non-believers might claim that Kapustin Yar is nothing more than a regular military base used for radar systems, satellite tracking, and low-level nuclear weapons testing, it should be noted that the Russian government didn't even acknowledge the base's existence until 1983, and furthermore, many former employees have claimed that while working on the base, they witnessed not only the reverse engineering of alien spacecrafts, but actual alien autopsies as well. And personally, I feel like this whole nuclear weapons testing thing has become such a popular way for secret military bases to keep people from getting too close. I mean, really, name a better deterrent than radiation poisoning. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to know if aliens exist as much as the next guy, but nothing is worth that. It's awful. Don't Google it.
Antarctica, yes, all of it. Antarctica has gained quite a reputation for being a hotspot for UFO sightings and theories about secret government bases dedicated to studying them. It's remote, inhospitable, makes for an ideal cover for secretive activities. Nobody really wants to go to Antarctica. It's desolate, the weather sucks. So not only would most people veer clear of it anyway, but makes it very difficult for ordinary people to access, allowing secretive operations to take place in secrecy. Some conspiracy theorists have pointed out images with unusual formations in the ice taken with satellites, which some people think could be entrances to underground military facilities and stuff like that. Some even believe there are pyramid-type structures there buried under the ice that might have been built by some ancient civilization, possibly with the help of extraterrestrials or just built by aliens entirely. The governments of the world, especially the United States and Russia, are said to have established secret research facilities in Antarctica to study alien technology and artifacts.
A top secret outpost located in the small town of Dulce, New Mexico, was apparently erected in the 1900s to monitor alien communication signals as well as other weird happenings that tend to come with the territory. According to locals living in the town, which has a population of about 2,700 people and not one single traffic light, alien signals were first intercepted in 1970. 1979. The following year, something strange happened. The bodies of dead animals began turning up all over town, mutilated in ways that one could not or would not want to explain. I will not be explaining because this is YouTube, not the dark web. In the years that followed, individuals who claimed to have been associated with the base, nicknamed the Dulce Alien Center, started coming forward. One man claimed to have helped build the facility and to even have witnessed a full-on battle between humans and alien beings. After that, UFO sightings in the town skyrocketed, probably because people now knew what to look for. Fast forward to today, and reports of UFO sightings are still pretty common in the small town of Dulce, as well as reports of top secret military projects, despite the fact that the government insists it has a total of 0 bases in the area. But who's buying that?
Majestic 12, often referred to simply as MJ12, is at the heart of pretty much everything we've talked about on this list. The organization is basically the king of government alien cover-up conspiracies. The story goes that in 1947, following the Roswell incident, where a supposed UFO crash occurred, President Truman established Majestic 12 as a secret committee of scientists, military leaders, and government officials whose mission was to investigate and cover up evidence of extraterrestrials. According to conspiracy theorists, MJ12's members included figures from the military, the scientific community, who would manage recovered alien technology, study it, possibly even operate on aliens. Documents about MJ12 allegedly leaked in 1985. UFOologists William Moore and Stanton Friedman claimed they'd been pointed to them by an anonymous whistleblower. One of the most disturbing chapters in the lore of MJ12, though, is their possible involvement in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Why? In order to prevent him from disclosing classified information about UFOs and aliens. We have a whole video on MJ12, so check that one out after this one. Majestic 12, an organization said to be at the heart of some of the biggest conspiracies in the United States, from Roswell to the Kennedy assassination. But what is Majestic 12? Well, if you're super into alien conspiracy stuff, you'll have seen them crop up all over the place. Said to be a top secret organization consisting of scientists, military leaders, and government officials who investigate alien spacecraft. Some even say they not only have direct contact with extraterrestrials, but work with them as well. Being given access to their technology, in exchange they cover up the aliens' presence on Earth while allowing them to study us. But that's a more outlandish version of the conspiracy. At the core, though, they're said to at least have knowledge of aliens, and maybe even work on reverse engineering their technology, doing alien autopsies on extraterrestrials that have crash landed on Earth, that sort of thing. This is basically what Bob Lazar was claiming to have seen while working at Area 51. You could start to see how much Majestic 12, or MJ12 as they're often called, are really at the core of almost every United States government alien conspiracy. The JFK assassination is often described as the mother of all conspiracies, and yes, with just a little digging, you'll find that MJ12 is mentioned here too. Some people believe that Kennedy found out about MJ12 and the secret dealings they had with aliens. Supposedly, he wanted to reveal the truth to the American public, thinking they had a right to know. This, of course, didn't sit well with MJ12, who were determined to keep everything under wraps. On top of that, or maybe alternatively, depending on who you talk to, Kennedy was sticking his nose where MJ12 didn't want him to, trying to have the US and the Soviets work together, but this would mean sharing sensitive information with them about UFOs, and MJ12 didn't want that. One piece of evidence that fueled this theory is a document called the Burned Memo. This document surfaced in the 90s, and it's said to be a memo from an MJ12 member ordering someone to essentially terminate Kennedy, using coded language, of course. The memo mentions Lancer, which was Kennedy's Secret Service code name. Now, another part of the theory involves a speech Kennedy gave at the United Nations in 1963, where he talked about the need for cooperation between the US and the Soviet Union, even suggesting they should work together in space exploration. So some believe this was a veiled reference that he was making for his desire to share UFO secrets with the world. There's also a memo that Kennedy sent to the CIA asking for a review of UFO files. He wanted to be debriefed on the unknowns, as he referred to them as in the memo. And what's very eerie theory is that this memo was dated just 10 days before he was killed. So, did MJ-12 see him as a threat to their secrecy and decided they needed to dispose of him? Now, how exactly did MJ-12 get started? Well, for that, we gotta go all the way back to the Roswell incident. Just how many dots are we gonna be connecting in this video? I told you, these guys are everywhere. So in July of 1947, something crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. The military first reported it as a flying disc, and this news spread like wildfire. But soon after, the story was changed. They claimed it was now just a weather balloon. So why this quick switch up? Was it really just a weather balloon, or was something else going on? Well, according to some, there was 100% something else going on. There are a lot of people who think the government was hiding something big. They suspected that the military had actually recovered an alien spacecraft and possibly even alien bodies from that crash site. This theory got stronger over the years as more people, including supposed whistleblowers, came forward with their own stories. MJ-12 is said to have spawned out of this Roswell incident, a secret group created by President Harry Truman. Story goes that the group was formed to manage and cover up all information about UFOs and extraterrestrials, particularly what was found at Roswell, and apparently they've been operating in the shadows ever since. But when did the rumors about MJ-12 begin? I mean, if they're so top secret, how did word about them start spreading in the first place? Well, the origins of the Majestic 12 conspiracy go back to the 80s. So in 1984, a UFO researcher named Jamie Shendere got an envelope in the mail with some film inside. When he developed the film, it apparently showed 8 pages of documents that looked like they were briefing papers for something called Operation Majestic 12. These papers described a secret group of 12 people, the names of scientists, military leaders, and government officials. More on them later. Then on May 31st, 1987, a British UFO researcher named Timothy Good claimed that he had documents from the 50s that revealed a secret committee called Majestic 12. And these documents apparently detailed everything I just outlined. This group was formed in 1947 by an order from President Harry S. Truman. The documents said the committee's job was to cover up the crash of the alien spacecraft at Roswell in July of 47. So figure out how to use the alien technology they found and decide how the US should deal with extraterrestrial life in the future. Who are some of the big names that were said to be in Majestic 12 though? Vannevar Bush was a key figure during World War II. He was a brilliant engineer and inventor, probably most famous for his work on the infamous Manhattan Project. He also helped create the National Science Foundation and was an advisor to President Roosevelt and President Truman. His name shows up in the MJ-12 documents and was allegedly part of the organization. If MJ-12 is real, Bush's inclusion would make sense. I mean, he worked on the Manhattan Project. If he was helping to build a nuclear bomb, why wouldn't he be involved in top secret UFO research? James Forrestal was the first US Secretary of Defense, appointed in 1947. Before that, he was a Secretary of the Navy. He was heavily involved in the early Cold War period, and he had access to some of the most classified information. He would have been a logical choice for a group like MJ-12. On top of that, there's always been some mystery as to the exact circumstances of his death in 1949, which some think may have had something to do with his involvement in MJ-12. Roscoe H. Hillenkotter was the first director of the CIA, serving from 1947 to 1950. He later joined the board of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, which is a civilian UFO research group. Makes sense why he'd be here. These are just a few of the names, of course. And now that we've dove into what this organization is, the history of it, who could have been involved, let's get into some of the criticism. We can't talk about Majestic 12 without mentioning the highly controversial Cutler-Twining memo. So I mentioned Jamie Shendere before, who'd received an envelope with photos of documents detailing MJ-12. Well, just a year later in 1985, he and 2 other well-known UFOologists, Shanton T. Friedman and Bill Moore, had been on the hunt for declassified files in the National Archives when they apparently received a series of anonymous messages leading them to a very interesting document. The memo is a 1-page document dated July 14, 1954. It was allegedly written by Robert Cutler, who was President Eisenhower's national security advisor, and addressed to General Nathan Twining. Twining was a high-ranking Air Force officer, which makes this memo a pretty big deal if it's real. The document briefly mentions MJ-12 and talks about a meeting which some people think was related to UFOs and alien technology. People who believe in MJ-12 and UFO cover-ups saw this as a major piece of proof that MJ-12 was real and involved in hiding information about UFOs. Here's where it gets controversial though. There are several problems with this memo. First, there's no official record of a meeting on the date mentioned in the memo. Second, the style and format of the memo don't match the official documents from that time. Even the typeface used is apparently off. Another big issue is that Robert Cutler was actually out of the country on the date the memo was supposedly written. A lot of these arguments were brought forward by a UFO researcher and skeptic named Philip J. Klass and the FBI. But Klass was often labeled as a disinformation agent by conspiracy theorists. And again, even the FBI chimed in though. The FBI dug into the Cutler Twining memo and other supposed MJ-12 documents. They began their investigation in 1988 after receiving copies of these supposed documents. There were apparently discrepancies in the language and terminology that would have been used in a document like this. Another big issue was the content of the documents themselves. The FBI stated that the information seemed out of place. It seemed to be suspiciously tailored to fit the UFO conspiracy theories that were very popular in the 80s, rather than reflecting what would have been talked about at the time the documents were supposedly formed. It just seemed like someone had written them with modern UFO enthusiasts in mind, rather than being a genuine historical document. So in the end, the FBI declared the MJ-12 documents to be falsified and wrote bogus on them with big bold letters. But did this really sway anyone who was highly skeptical of the government in the first place? Yeah, not really. And I mean, fair enough. It would make sense for an intelligence and security service organization like the FBI to cover up or downplay something like this. So, does MJ-12 still exist? Did they ever exist at all? Well, they may or may not, but if the whole thing is fake, then how and why was this conspiracy concocted? Well, the first thought is that it's just UFO enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists looking too deeply into things and spotting things that aren't really there, but there's another possibility. I mentioned the UFO researcher Bill Moore earlier, who was one of the big names involved in the unearthing of these supposed MJ-12 documents. Well, he actually started changing his tune about this whole thing. Moore thought that the government was covering something up. It just may have not been aliens, unfortunately. Instead, he thinks the whole thing was drummed up by the United States government as part of a mass disinformation campaign. The purpose? To distract the public from top secret Air Force projects that were really going on. It makes sense. People would get so excited by the idea that the government was interacting with extraterrestrials that they'd be totally blind to the actual nefarious stuff the government was working on. But there's another aspect to this theory as well. What if the disinformation campaign was formed by the government in order to lessen people's interest in aliens and UFOs? What do I mean by this? Well, think about it. The government creates the documents, lets the public obsess over them, then discredits them to make the whole topic of UFOs look silly. Purpose of this? UFOs and aliens really are existing and they just don't want the public to be focusing on it. Hey, who knows?
The Roswell incident is arguably the most famous UFO crash in history, although the government would claim otherwise. Basically, on June 24th of 1947, while searching for a crashed military aircraft, pilot Kenneth Arnold spotted 9 UFOs flying over the Cascade Mountains of Washington state in the US. The objects were flying in formation at a height of about 10,000 feet and a speed of approximately 1,900 kilometers per hour, which was not possible at the time, for humans that is. Kenneth described the way the objects moved as jerky, like rocks skipping over the water, flashing forward at strange intervals. When the media got a hold of the story, they coined the phrase flying saucer, and the UFO craze took off at hyperspeed, especially when on July 7th, a local rancher named Mac Brazel called the sheriff to let him know that one of those objects had somehow ended up on his farm, and this came to be known as the Roswell incident. incident.
It was back in July of 1947 that something strange happened near Roswell, New Mexico. Something had crashed into the ground, into Brazel's farm. There were metal pieces, rubber strips, and a strange tin foil-like material. The nearby Roswell Army airfield was alerted. The military came out and collected the debris. At first they issued a press release saying they had recovered an unknown flying disc. This really got people talking, but just a day later the Army changed their story, saying it was actually just a weather balloon. Now, while some of the public took this at face value, it caused some controversy, especially in the years to come. People started to believe that the military was covering up something much bigger, possibly an alien spacecraft crash. Over the years, people started to come forward claiming to have seen the wreckage, and not only were there strange markings on the material described by some as hieroglyphics, but the material was incredibly strong and seemed to almost be impossible to burn. Oh, and of course, people who'd been called to the site to recover the material claimed to have seen bodies that were clearly not human. Over the years, many people have questioned the official explanation for this incident. Even former military personnel and locals said they saw strange things at the crash site, like debris that didn't look like it came from any known aircraft, and even small bodies that didn't seem human. In 1994, the US Air Force released a report saying the debris was from a top secret project called Project Mogul, a project that used high altitude balloons to detect Soviet nuclear tests. They said the unusual materials found were just parts of these balloons and their sensors, but this explanation didn't satisfy everyone. In 1997, on the 50th anniversary of the incident, the Air Force released another report to address the claims about these alien bodies. They said these were actually just crash test dummies used in military experiments, not extraterrestrial beings. But again, a lot of people were and still are highly skeptical of this. The Roswell incident happened less than 2 years after the atomic bombs were dropped on Japan in 1945. Those bombs were created through a secret project that lasted 3 years and had 3 main sites, including one in New Mexico. So if the government could keep the atomic bomb a secret for so long, why wouldn't they be able and willing to hide information about a crashed UFO landing? Plus, little mannequins? I think most people would look at that and be able to tell the difference between an alien and a crash test dummy.
So this foreign object that landed on Mac Brazel's farm actually did so a few days prior to him calling into the sheriff's department. To be honest, he hadn't thought much of it until he started reading about Kenneth Arnold flying saucers and UFOs in the papers. Once he learned about the possible presence of technologically advanced ships with no known origin that likely came from outer space, he began to wonder if that was in fact what had landed on his farm just a few nights ago. And so he gathered up some of the debris and took them down to the local police station. In response, the sheriff immediately contacted the nearby army base, and soon intelligence officer Jesse Marcel had arrived on the scene and instructed Brazel to take him to the crash site so that the two could collect more debris. So let's talk about Jesse Marcel, the first military officer to step foot on the scene of the crash, because apparently Jesse had a lot to say, according to his son Jesse Jr., who went on to tell his father's story after his death in 1986. According to Jesse Jr., in 1947, when he was just 10 years old, his father woke him up in the middle of the night, excited after having visited the crash site. Jesse Jr. sat up as Jesse Sr. handed him some of the debris he had collected earlier that day on Brazel's farm, and he told Jesse Jr. to get a good look because the debris were something that he would never see again. They were not of this earth, and the pair simply could not make sense of them. Out of all of the debris his father had brought home, Jesse Jr. said that the one that fascinated him most was a small beam with purple-hued hieroglyphics. I suppose it's not difficult to see why the pair didn't believe the government when they released a report saying that what had been found on the Brazel's farm was nothing more than a discarded weather balloon. But of course, you don't mess with the government. And so for years, both Jesse Jr. and his father kept quiet about what they had seen. That is until in the late 1970s, a man named Stanton Friedman showed up asking questions. Stanton T. Friedman, a nuclear physicist turned ufologist, tracked down Jesse Sr. after being tipped off that a retired military man might know something about the Roswell incident, something that had been kept from the public for the past 31 years. And it turns out he did. Jesse Sr. told Friedman that the weather balloon story had in fact been a cover-up, and that the original wreckage had been replaced with a weather balloon shortly after military personnel first arrived on the seen. Not only that, but Jesse claimed that despite what their superiors had wanted them to believe, it was incredibly clear to everyone working on the site that the object had in fact been an extraterrestrial spaceship with outstanding craftsmanship and incredibly advanced out-of-this-world technologies. Although, unfortunately, Jesse did claim that he never got to witness the alleged aliens inside of the craft being pulled out, but still, he's ex-military, he was there. It's a pretty compelling case if you ask me.
There are also witnesses aside from Brazel's claiming to have seen some strange things. So many of these witnesses stayed silent for years, but eventually began speaking out to close friends or family about what they'd seen, still fearing repercussions from the government. There was another crash site about 40 miles from Brazel's ranch where more wreckage and alien bodies were said to be being recovered. A firefighter who went to this site claimed that he saw a large disc in the ground and several small, non-human bodies nearby. He said that military officials told him to keep quiet about what he saw. Sergeant Melvin Brown also shared his experience. He said he rode in a truck with the bodies from the crash site to Roswell Field and then stood guard at the hangar where they were first kept. He was instructed not to look under a tarp, but he got curious and he peeked. He claimed he saw 2 alien bodies. The government has always denied his claims, but several people who were there or knew people who were there have said they saw wreckage and bodies arrive at Wright Field. Retired General Arthur Exon stated that a top secret committee was set up to oversee the investigation of this and other classified UFO incidents. After the Roswell crash, the debris was secretly flown from Fort Worth, Texas to Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio. At Wright Field, Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Exon, who later became the base commander, recalled that some of the material was very thin, but incredibly strong. And it wasn't just metal that arrived at Wright Field either. At the second crash site a few miles from the first, they discovered a smaller, more intact craft and 4 bodies lying nearby. These bodies did not look human. Again, according to witnesses, the bodies were described as being in fairly good condition despite having been exposed for 6 days. Some parts of the bodies have been chewed on by animals. Descriptions from those who saw the bodies are pretty consistent. They were said to be 4 to 5 feet tall, with big heads, large eyes, and small mouths. Basically your classic idea of an alien. They had thin bodies with long arms and 4 fingers. An army nurse who worked on the initial autopsy described how fragile the skulls and bones were too. The bodies were quickly placed in large, sealed wooden crates, loaded onto a B-29 bomber and flown to Fort Worth before being sent to Wright Field.
Now, the general public weren't the only ones concerned with the Roswell crash. In fact, one of the highest members of government was too, the president, which at the time was Harry S. Truman. After the incident took place, Truman became increasingly interested and concerned with UFOs, so much so that in 1948 he called a meeting with his military aide, Colonel Robert Laundrie, in the Oval Office to discuss UFO reports and what they might mean for the security of the country. Laundrie told Truman that, quote, all manner of objects and things were being seen in the sky by people as of late, which only led the president to worry more about the possibility of new, never-before-seen threats to the American people. And so Truman ordered a quarterly oral report from both Laundrie and the Air Force to be presented to him at the White House to discuss whether or not the UFO sightings would present any kind of immediate danger. Although neither the military or the Air Force were ever able or willing to provide Truman with any answers, the UFO sightings kept coming and officials became more and more confused. To this day, it's unclear what information the government has gathered on UFOs, but what we do know is that if they do in fact have concrete evidence supporting the existence of alien life forms, they sure as heck aren't sharing it with us. Yet, fingers crossed.
The Roswell incident was the catalyst for pretty much every modern UFO conspiracy today. Before Roswell, the idea of aliens was just that, really, an idea. But when stories about this mysterious crash hit the papers, it really changed the public's view of the possibility of alien life forever. Suddenly, what people had read about in science fiction and fantasy novels or watched on the big screen was something a lot more concrete. Project Blue Book formed a few years after the Roswell incident, a genuine Air Force program dedicated to investigating UFOs, at least in the early days. Area 51, the mysterious Men in Black, Majestic 12, all of these things started being whispered about in the years following the Roswell incident. There are large sections of Antarctica that are completely off limits to the public. They're called the ASPA, Antarctic Specially Protected Areas. These are regions in Antarctica given special protection. The only people allowed to set foot there are scientists or military to make sure people don't mess with the ecosystems or disrupt the scientific research. But as we know, any top secret area is going to spark a lot of questions. So a lot of conspiracy theories about Antarctica stem from these protected areas. When people hear about no-fly zones or areas where only certain scientists can go, they start to wonder why. So are these restricted areas concealing more than your standard scientific research? Are there secret military bases involved in dangerous research, possibly even involving aliens? Since only a few are allowed in, it's easy for imaginations to conjure things up, but is there any evidence of disturbing stuff going on in the frozen tundra of Antarctica?
In the 1950s, Professor Charles Hapgood proposed a fabulous theory that hidden underneath the ice sheets is the lost city of Atlantis. If you know me, you know I absolutely love the ocean and the movie Atlantis, The Lost Empire, so I am all for this theory. Basically, and we have lots of videos on this, Antarctica used to be a subtropical landscape, and that's not just a theory, that's a fact. You can look it up. But what if that subtropical landscape just so happens to be the landscape of Atlantis, home to the incredibly intelligent and powerful Atlanteans? Furthermore, it is believed that prior to the entire city sinking into the ocean and being engulfed in ice, the Atlanteans migrated from Antarctica to Mexico to found Aztec and Mayan empires, and then to Egypt to create the Egyptian Empire as well. I mean, it would explain the similarities between the pyramids and hieroglyphics found in both locations. Something to think about. The presence of Atlanteans in Egypt, Mexico, and Antarctica might also explain the pyramids in Antarctica. Yeah. In 2016, 3 pyramids were discovered in Antarctica measuring up to 4,000 feet tall, meaning they are just about 10 times larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza located in Egypt, which previously held the record of largest pyramid in the world. While there are no records of ancient civilizations having existed in Antarctica, many people agree that that doesn't matter. Why? Well, because the entirety of Antarctica literally used to be a subtropical paradise, and now it's covered in 2,160 meters of ice. So I'm sorry, scientists, but you just might not be able to access the evidence because it's been buried under over 7,000 feet of ice for the past 34 million years. Of course, the other theory is that the aliens built the pyramid and then traveled to Mexico and Egypt to do the same thing there. 6 in one, half a dozen in the other, I guess. Either way, the existence of the Antarctic pyramids and the similarities they share with the pyramids found in the warmer regions of Egypt and Mexico are undeniable.
Operation Deep Freeze was a series of US Navy missions starting in 1955 to establish American research bases in Antarctica. The operation involved tons of military personnel, scientists, and staff, but during some of these missions there were a few reports from crew members and scientists about strange things they'd spot in the sky over Antarctica. Unusual lights or objects moving in ways that didn't match any known aircraft. These reports aren't nearly as well known as others that come to mind, and a lot of that has to do with, one, how remote Antarctica is. There just weren't mass amounts of people to corroborate the sightings, and two, the people who were there were government employees. So much of what they were doing wasn't allowed to be disclosed, even leaving UFOs out of the picture. One of the most famous UFO sightings over Antarctica happened in 1965, though. During a period of intense scientific research in the continent, researchers spotted something in the sky. It was near the Antarctic coast where a group of researchers had been working. They reported seeing an unusual object that didn't look like any known aircraft. According to the reports, the object was bright and metallic, moving in these sporadic, unpredictable patterns. It changed direction suddenly and moved at speeds that seemed far too fast for any technology that was known at the time. Now, at this same time, there were very few aircraft in the region, making this whole thing even stranger.
Alright, buckle up, because for this next one we've got the rhymes with Yahtzees, aliens, and nuclear weapons. That's right, there is a theory that states that Antarctica is actually a secret, oppressive Germany circa World War II military base dedicated to housing advanced technologies and massive nuclear weapons that could quite literally eradicate all of us in a matter of minutes, if whoever is currently running the base decided to set them all off at once. To make matters worse, a recent evidence shows that a secret military base close to the North Pole, located in northwest Greenland, might be used for the same thing. So, if whoever they are wanted, they could probably take out the whole planet. Not comforting. Now, some people take the whole thing a step further by bringing aliens into the mix, saying that the advanced technologies are actually out of this world technologies brought to Earth by our extraterrestrial alien friends. Now, if we have extraterrestrial allies, who's to say we don't have otherworldly adversaries as well? Maybe the advanced tech is to protect us rather than destroy us. One can only hope.
For decades, there have been rumors that the Third Reich also set up a secret base in Antarctica during World War II. The Third Reich were known for their interest in mysticism and the occult, always on the hunt for ancient artifacts they believed had special powers to help them conquer the world, and some people think they might have been searching for something hidden deep in the frozen tundra of Antarctica. Either that or they were experimenting with advanced high-tech weapons, Antarctica being perfect given how remote it is. Some even think these secret research projects carried on after the war ended, and after the Second World War in 1946 and 47, the US did send a large naval fleet to Antarctica in an operation called Operation Highjump. The official reason was to train personnel and test equipment, but some conspiracy theorists believe the real mission was to find and destroy this alleged German base, to take out the remnants of their forces and their secret projects for good. Or maybe they were shown up to take over the research for themselves.
Take a look at this 130-foot tall, nearly perfect rectangular iceberg. Does it look natural to you? Yeah, me neither. There are a ton of these strangely geometric icebergs scattered throughout Antarctica. Why? Well, the scientific explanation is that they naturally formed after part of an iceberg broke off of a much larger iceberg, which is cool and all, but not nearly as interesting as the leading conspiracy theory. You see, many people believe that the icebergs were carved by aliens thousands of years ago as some kind of launching pad or secret base. Scientists say that's ridiculous because not every corner of the iceberg is perfect, only some. I mean, duh, they were carved thousands of years ago. Ever heard of erosion? Next thing you know, they're gonna start saying that the pyramids weren't created by ancient Egyptians, but after a rock broke off a bigger rock because the top isn't perfectly pointy. Nice try, scientists. Perhaps the government shares the secret underground base with the aliens, and that is why they are so keen on keeping us out and taking every possible precaution to make sure we don't find out the truth about what really goes on in the Great White South.
Now, moving outside of the conspiratorial and theoretical realm for a moment, let's talk about a very real and very mysterious lake in Antarctica, Lake Vostok, the largest known subglacial lake in the continent. The lake is buried beneath more than 2 miles of ice, so what makes this place extra special? Well, it's been sealed off from the world for about 15 million years. That means whatever's swimming around down there has been doing its thing in total isolation for longer than humans have been around. The lake is pretty much one big prehistoric time capsule. It was completely untouched by the outside world for millions of years, but scientists have started attempting to explore it. It's not easy though. They gotta set up camp in one of the coldest places on Earth and then drill through ice thicker than your average skyscraper is tall, while trying not to contaminate the water down below. But in 2012, scientists did confirm they found living organisms in the lake, microbes living in a place where no one expected life to thrive. So, who knows what else could be lurking even deeper down? Speaking of deeper down, here's Hannah.
Is Antarctica actually the entrance to center Earth? Well, maybe. It's a story as old as time, or, well, a story as old as the conspiracy theory at least. There are, believe it or not, a group of people who believe that an asteroid that crashed into Antarctica millions of years ago caused a crack in the Earth that revealed a secret utopia. In 2006, scientists working in Antarctica discovered a crater deep underneath the permafrost, and of course, they believe the crater had been formed by an asteroid. But conspiracy theorists believe that scientists aren't telling the whole truth. They say that the crater actually cracked right through the top layer of Earth to reveal that tropical paradise that is now the go-to vacation hotspot for the world's global elites, presidents, celebrities, and perhaps aliens too. There are also theories out there that say that the asteroid really did just create a crater, but that crater is where the soldiers from World War II Germany set up camp. Alongside the aliens, of course.
Such as number 10's Ryan Graves. For those of us who keep our heads deep under a rock as possible, such as myself, Ryan Graves has been breaking the internet recently with his very vocal claims of UFOs, going as far to say that he saw them every day in his time as a Navy pilot. Now, the dude is no foil hat freak. He comes packing your usual high qualifications and certifications needed for this role. So Graves is a former Navy pilot and engineer, chairs of America Institute Aeronautics and Astronautics UAP Integration and Outreach Committee, and now the founder of the new nonprofit Americans for Safe Aerospace, which is like Mothers Against Drunk Driving for our atmosphere. Graves chose to testify in front of Congress last month about how he feels these UAP, which is the boring version of a UFO, are actually a threat to our security and safety. So in April of 2014, his FA-18 squadron was on a training mission, and he said after achieving 12,000 feet in what's an exclusive naval airspace, i.e. nobody can fly here zone, two jets crossed the threshold to find, and I quote, a dark gray cube inside of a clear sphere, motionless against the wind, fixed directly at the entry point. He goes on to say that the jets, only 100 feet apart, zipped past the object on either side. The pilots had come so dangerously close to something they couldn't identify that they terminated the training mission immediately and returned to base. Ryan Graves said that the flight leader, in extreme duress, told him, I almost hit one of those damn things, man, in the pilot's ready room, and that we all knew exactly what he meant by those damn things, as they'd been plaguing us for the last 8 months. Having had this harrowing and potentially deathly experience, should things have been slightly different, Graves felt the need to develop a reporting service for pilots who come across these unidentified flying objects, shedding light on a huge amount of investment that goes into the training of commercial pilots. Graves questioned the government for turning its back on the UAP reports, even though they all come from credible eyewitnesses. Number 9, which is the 2022 H0219. So, unlike America, Canada actually does have a UFO entry database for pilots. It's called KDORS, and it'll document anything from unruly passengers on flights to birds getting sucked into engines to aliens, apparently. As long as it's causing a problem and it's in the air, KDORS wants to know about it. Now, Transport Canada, despite having a reporting service for such things as UFOs, still cautions that reports contain preliminary, unconfirmed data that can be subject to change. And 2022 H0219 is the KDORS case number assigned to an incident that took place on September 17th of 2022, when an Air Canada flight from Toronto, quote, reported passing an unidentified object approximately 10 feet above the captain's window while making a left-hand bank at 1,300 feet just an hour before sunset. The report continues to mention that the flight crew couldn't identify the object, which is confusing seeing as it's 10 feet from the captain's window, and they went on to land without further incident. Now, the report wraps itself up with that, and trust me, if you visit the KDORS log, it's vague at best. But now you have a bit more context as to why they have that subject to change warning on their website. I'm not saying they would casually omit details, but you really think something was 10 feet away from the pilot and the airline's attendants' faces and they couldn't ID it? On to number 8, which is 2022 02794. Another KDORS flight sighting. So there is quite literally no shortage of them. According to CTV, from unidentified objects to strange lights, Canadian aviation officials receive at least 16 unusual reports in 2022, including 11 from pilots flying for Air Canada, WestJet, Virgin Atlantic, United, and more. This report was made by NAV Canada on November 12th of 2022. It was a cargo freighter flying from Chicago to Frankfurt, Germany overnight. The route taken brings the pilots right overhead northeastern Ontario, where good things grow. The KDORS document, which was entered a few days after the incident, states that the pilots reported seeing lights that were moving eastward at the same speed as the aircraft while flying in the dark. Now, there's no further particular information on this one, but I sure wish there was. Number 7 is a break from counter reports. It's going to be the racetrack. So veteran pilot Chris Van Voris told the Daily Mail of a strange encounter he had had in which 3 to 5 bright objects flew in a circular motion like a racetrack for hours on end over top of the Pacific Ocean in August of 2022. Their racetrack seemed to stretch from Honolulu to Los Angeles and then back. Similar to Graves, the 63-year-old Voris ain't some random dude in a tinfoil hat. He's racked up over 32,000 hours of flight experience working with multiple airlines, and when he witnessed this awe-inspiring yet decidedly creepy phenomena, Voris said that he was hit with an onslaught of other airline pilots radioing in to ask if he was seeing the objects as well. Apparently, as he told Daily Mail, about half of his pilot friends have seen some type of anomaly in the sky. They had to be in a very, very high orbit, or actually even in space quite a ways away from anything that a satellite would be, because every time we were seeing it, it was in the lower right-hand corner of the Big Dipper, no matter where we were in the world, he told the outlet. It lasted for such a long time that it actually became boring. Almost. Van Voris' employer, whose name is withheld, forbade him from speaking about the incident. However, that hasn't kept him from running his mouth, claiming to have also seen 3 flying discs in a triangular formation back in 2004. Number 6 will be the letter response. After tackling the dragon that is paywalls, I was able to scrape together the details of a letter written by Art Sabosky, entitled A Pilot Explains UFOs for the Last Time. Now, to save you guys some time and the paywalls, Art's letter is essentially him complaining that he spent 45 years as a pilot and hasn't seen boo, and all his pilot friends haven't seen anything either, therefore no pilot could have ever seen anything ever, and if they have, they're either Mary Jane smoking or visually impaired. Essentially, you could title his letter, I am mad other professional aviators have seen something and I haven't. Now, the whole argument of if I haven't seen a thing, therefore it does not exist is pretty much the argument of UFO non-believers. This is why Ralph Lowinger was quick to fire back a response. So UFOs don't exist because you and your friends haven't seen one? I know they exist because I was a co-pilot of a Pan-American cargo flight with 5 crew members who clearly saw their formation. It was on a crystal clear moonless night over Nova Scotia's south coast, and we all watched and saw the same thing through different panes of cockpit glass. Their dance was from another world. It lasted 5 minutes and terminated with the most dazzling feat of aerodynamics we have ever seen. I have now retired to the largest fly-in community in the world, in which many highly trained observers know that UFOs are real. Cataracts and floaters aside. Lowinger and other crew members never reported their sightings, but their story did come to light in 2011. Number 5 will be the Skydiver. So this story comes out of the Virginia pilot Julius Figueroa in July of 2022. Julius had served in the Navy as a pilot for 2 years before getting a job in the Midwest as a skydive pilot. What would be considered an everyday venture, loaded up with his usual adrenaline junkies trying to touch the clouds, Julius and his passengers experienced a different kind of adrenaline-invoking experience. We were climbing 10,000 feet, and at around 4,300 feet, I was looking into the distance and this thing caught my eye, Figueroa said. It started getting closer and it was approaching me about 15 feet to my left heading north. Figueroa goes on to say that the object was spherical golden orb that was flying very fast, but interestingly, he reported that you couldn't see the object when you looked at it directly. Other pilots have reported the same thing during their encounters, and it does sound like an explanation for what happened even in our first story, where Graves' team didn't notice the flying anomaly until they were about to crash into it. Julia said that the object was the size of a small car, and without realizing it, he started turning his plane to the left. As the object passed by, Figueroa said he started yelling, causing the other people in the back of the plane to look out the window. 3 of the skydivers see it, including one of the instructors, Figueroa says. By the time I turned the plane, it was already on the horizon, and shortly after, the object was gone. Figueroa contacted air traffic control and asked them if they'd seen a drone on radar, to which they said they didn't. He called again and described the object he saw and asked if they had seen it. To quote him, there was a long pause on the other end, and then they said they didn't see it. Number 4 will be the Passover, and not the one with the matzah and the karpas. I'm still full from the last one. I'm talking about the weird and very underdocumented occurrence from June of 2023 in which a pilot in Toronto reported, and I quote, seeing a person in a wingsuit flying at an altitude of 13,000 feet. Now, articles did mention that this incident was filed with Transport Canada. However, even after spending hours searching KDORs, I was unable to find a report or provide a case number. But to give you an idea why this reporting is so weird, aside from everything about it, A, who uses a wingsuit nowadays? And B, this altitude actually breaches the death zone. For those of us who don't climb Mount Everest and are free every time. The death zone is to refer to the point at which an altitude's lack of oxygen becomes insufficient to sustain human life. The average person tends to die around altitudes of 8,000 feet and higher, and it's all attributed to the physical capabilities of cellular oxygenation. So what does that mean? Aliens. Number 3 is gonna be our last CADORD report of the list. It is 2022-1004. Where? Kitchener-Waterloo area. For my viewers outside of Canada, it's a few hours drive from Toronto, Ontario, and it's a lovely little college town chock full of frat boys, geese, and hockey. And now, apparently, their new claim to fame is that there's some aliens all up overhead. During the daylight hours of May 28, 2022, local police were notified after multiple reports were received by local traffic of an unidentified object, possibly a balloon or a radio-controlled plane, at 3,000 feet and 7 nm south of Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. It's incredibly frustrating trying to pursue more knowledge or information on this sighting, as unfortunately its documentation is limited to what I just told you. You'd think there have been so many witnesses and reports between pilot and citizens alike, perhaps there'd be more statements. What I did learn, however, is since Ontario kept popping up for these sightings and I was curious, is that according to 2022 numbers, Quebec led all provinces with about 29% of all Canadian UFO reports, narrowly edging out Ontario, who has 28% out of the total recorded 786 sightings in our country. Number 2 is the Tic Tac. Remember Ryan Graves and how he testified to Congress? Well, he's not the only one who did. During a hearing before the House lawmakers, retired Navy fighter pilot and commander David Fravor testified about his experience seeing what he described as a Tic Tac looking object while on a flight back in 2004. Commanding the FA-18F squadron on the USS Nimitz, he and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich were on a flight off the coast of Southern California on November 14th of 2004 when they saw a flying object. The advanced radar on the ship was part of their training group and detected what operators called multiple anomalous aerial vehicles over the horizon, descending 80,000 feet in less than a second. Fravor and Dietrich swerved over that way to investigate, each carrying an extra witness, the weapons system officer, in the backs of their jets. Fravor recalls the experience. I said, dude, do you see that thing down there? And we saw this little white Tic Tac looking object, and it was just kind of moving above the whitewater area. Fravor went in for a closer look. He described the Tic Tac object mirroring his movement, saying it was aware we were there and that all 4 of us in the airplanes literally were watching this thing for roughly about 5 minutes. The object was about the size of Fravor's FA-18F, with no markings, no wings, and no visible exhaust plumes. When Fravor tried to cut off the strange flying anomaly, it accelerated so quickly it seemed to disappear. He said it was detected roughly 60 miles away less than a minute later. I think what we experienced was, like I said, well beyond the material science and capabilities that we had at that time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years. And coming in at number 1 will be the 7. So this ex-FBI agent named Ben Hansen is now the host of the Discovery Plus TV series UFO Witness. He works hard to try and bring attention to UFOs, and in doing so collects worldwide reports and videos he can share that are as credible as possible. He compiled accounts from pilots from Southwest Airlines, Hawaiian Airlines, and others between August 6th and September 23rd of 2022. And in the captivating account we'll be discussing from this time period, a former military pilot reported seeing multiple aircrafts flying above him. Pilot Mark Hulsley was flying a charter jet on August 18th of 2022 off the coast of Los Angeles when he suddenly radioed in the following. We've got a few aircrafts to our north here, and he's going around in circles, much higher altitude than us. Any idea what they are? The confused controller responds, telling the pilot he's not sure. Hulsey then calls back 23 minutes later to say that the 3 aircrafts he had originally reported had now increased to 7, flying between 5,000 and 10,000 feet above him in a regimented pattern. While the controller continues to dismiss him, we hear the anxiety spike in Hulsey, who's absolutely adamant, stating in the recorded footage to the controller that they just keep going in circles. I was an F-18 pilot in the Marine Corps, and I'm telling you, I've done many intercepts, I've never seen anything like this. According to Hansen, the strange lights that some pilots reported as possible aircraft were seen by upwards of 15 different commercial flights, and that at least 6 pilots are willing to go on record with their names and everything if asked to do so by any investigative agencies. According to Hansen, it means in this case we have a global phenomena as far west as Japan to as far east as possibly Miami. Whatever it is, these pilots are seeing it from halfway across the world. Hansen said there's no official protocol for reporting strange sightings for civilian pilots because they don't think the FAA will follow up, or worse, they will be ridiculed. But as we know, Ryan Graves is working to change that,